Dystopia tonight.
Fuck out of town! Fucking treasonous pieces of shit!
Dystopia tonight.
Hey, do you like that? Did you like that intro?
Love it. Yeah, it scared the hell out of me. I think that's the way it should be.
And that's exactly why we're here. It's to make you go, oh my God, we're still in this fresh new hell. And
Fresh hell every day, actually.
yeah.
Yeah, freshly baked.
You know what's really fucked up? And I've said this a million times before, so I apologize to my listeners and viewers. But I had planned to change that intro, and I was like, we don't need to do this. This has been going. You're the 300 and something episode, I think, or whatever,
Wow,
or
awesome.
close to. But
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, and but I was like, oh, I'm going to need to change that intro. I mean, so much has changed and blah blah blah. This is during like Biden, whatever. And then I never did it because I'm a comedian and I'm a little lazy. And then Trump got reelected again, and all of that shit I was like, it's all the same. I don't need to do a fucking thing. Nothing's changed.
Yeah.
So
yeah, when I saw the name of your podcast, I always think of the Entertainment Tonight Show theme. They're like da na 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 da na. But whenever somebody died, they would have the sad piano going da na 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 na. And we're mourning the loss of Teddy the chimp. Like whatever.
yeah,
Teddy was 45, surrounded by family,
heavily smoked. Yeah,
exactly.
Oh God, yeah.
Anyhow,
no, I know. Yeah, no,
well, it's good to be here.
Thank you so much for being here, man. I appreciate it. No, it is. It's good to. That's why this is. I feel like once that intro ends, this is the safe space where you just talk about what's keeping you alive through the dystopia.
Oh, that's a very good intro. Yeah, that's a very good entry point to the next hour of wonderfulness. Yes, for sure.
Exactly. And it is going to be a next hour of wonderfulness because you've written a book about one of my favorite entertainers, and I think people of all time, even though I've never technically met him, but he has that kind of effect, I think, on everybody who loved him, where you're like there's a couple people, I think, in the entertainment world who have passed away, who have had impacts on other people's lives as if they were their own family members or their own and John Candy's one of them, and the other one for me was Robin Williams.
Oh yeah, I can see that. There are some areas where in my book I sort of cross. I don't really mention Robin by name, but we'll talk about it. There's a thing that I think Robin would have appreciated in John Candy, and I never got to ask him. But anyway. But yeah, so yeah, I have this book, and I'm ready to answer a million questions.
Fantastic. Well, the thing, real quick though, the thing too about Robin Williams is I never knew until maybe like a few years ago. I think it may have been even during COVID, because somebody had posted a video clip of him and Robin. I guess it must have been an SCTV thing where Robin.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, but I never knew they met, interacted. I mean, you assume, but I don't want to, like that.
Yeah, Robin was on SCTV. Yeah, and they did a Bowery Boys sketch, as I recall.
Yeah, and that's what and I'd never seen it before though.
No, yeah, it's amazing. I not to get all businessy, but the book's called John Candy: A Life in Comedy. If you're just tuning in.
Yes. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's my.
No, because I like people to know what the hell was that book called.
Yeah.
So it's I didn't get to talk to Robin for this book, but I talked to a whole bunch of people. But SCTV was a big part of it, and actually a big part of the reason why I wrote the book, because I really wanted to write. I love sketch comedy and the history of sketch comedy, and I really wanted to write about Second City, but I also wanted to write about SCTV. And then an editor said to me, who did my Kids in the Hall book, which was my last book, was One Dumb Guy, the Kids in the Hall story.
Right.
And it's kind of it did fairly well in its community, people who would buy books about comedy. And the editor said, "Do you want to do this?" And I said, well, I said I wanted to do SCTV. And you remember that movie hasn't come out yet?
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was going to come out like the year I was starting to do this book. So I said, I don't think I should do an SCTV book, and then the editor said, do John Candy, because then you can talk about all the movies. So it's SCTV, but it's also John Candy. So my way of folding in all of the stuff that I love about the Chicago Second City, the Toronto Second City, and then the TV show. But then Then we quickly get into Stripes, Uncle Buck, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, the Blues Brothers, because he's in that.
Yeah.
Even 1941, some would say ill-advised Steven Spielberg comedy.
Yep.
With
Exactly.
a cast of thousands,
And seriously, and I enjoyed that too, because I remember seeing that as a kid and just getting to see John Candy do something a little bit, like if you there's people who are fans of entertainers or actors and what they do, and then there's people who are like, I need to see everything they've done because I want to see this guy. I want to see their range. I want to see whatever the fuck and that's the kind of we talked about comedy nerds briefly backstage, but that's the kind of comedy nerd I am, is like, I love his comedy. I love everything he's doing, but I want to see the dramatic stuff. I want to see the weird shit. I want to see the stuff that maybe no one, that critics might not be that thrilled with or whatever. So,
yeah, no. And the joy of being a biographer, you have to actually look at his stuff, but in this case, you get to and today it's never been easier. It's still very hard to get a lot of information, but it's never been easier to find YouTube clips and search archives, digital searching archives of the New York Times for reviews and things like that. Like, you can do a lot more stuff from your home that you never used to have to do. And then you go out to the various libraries, and there's stuff in Hollywood. There's a Hollywood Academy library that it's filled with really cool goodies, and so I was never really good in school, but over the last 5 books, I've become pretty good at I'm pretty adept at how to write a book anyway.
Right.
The court
absolutely
can decide whether I do it well. People are saying this one's good, but I it's not for me to say, except that I'm very satisfied with it.
Yeah, no, it's so good though, because, and another thing that you kind of touched on it a few minutes ago, you had said, you got to touch on the Second City stuff. What I liked about this is it wasn't just about a singular person, in this case John Candy, but it was literally about the orbit that they that they traveled in, and that everybody else, like, so I like that kind of thing too, especially because I want to know, like, who he touched and what he was involved in and who wound up passing through. There's like only a couple biographies I've ever read in my life that do that kind of thing, where like, if you wind up reading the Rickles autobiography, right, and then there's the one that Steve Martin wrote, another autobiography. But what's weird is
Born Standing Up.
Born Standing Up. Great.
I love that book.
Me too. Great fucking book. But what's cool is I was reading, I think they came out almost around the same time, but they each reference the same story to an extent, but it just happens to be from obviously their points of view. But the timetable in your head, you're like, oh my God, okay, so 1973, Rickles was coming from this place, and they went over to see somebody else, and they referenced each other, and it was accidental, definitely, but it was the same type of story, same type of like, background or whatever. And I feel like you kind of did that with the John Candy thing in a way that was like, I got a 360 view of.
I want to tell you something really. It's kind of a thing that goes through my head. It's like I get kind of giddy when I think about the fact that the subject of any of my books could be also about the scene in which it came in. And I just want to quickly take you on a tour. So my first book that I got asked to write, the Bare Naked Ladies, the group, the Bare Naked Ladies,
because I love that book.
Well, thank you. I was a musician in the Toronto scene, and I also became a writer around that time. And we were friends, and we'd done shows together, and they were starting to make it big in America. This is like they had the hit called 1 Week that was actually at #1. It was on MTV and VH1 all the time. So they said, we were going to do a book about the first 10 years of our life and how we got here, so that our new fans and everyone could. So they said, Paul, we want you to write it. And I really just started doing writing, and they kind of liked my style.
Right.
So I said, okay, great. I'll make it about the world we came from, because I could tell it. And then this same approach I used in the Kids in the Hall book, because I was there with the Kids in the Hall, because I was in a band that was playing the Rivoli Club where they were playing.
Right.
And, the elephant in the room, my brother being at Second City at the same time that they're Kids in the Hall. So I was at the tapings of the Kids in the Hall TV series. So I got to write about the world in which they were in. And I've done this with also the book about Todd Rundgren that I did, where I talked about all his studio records and everything like that. And I got to sort of talk about the scene in which he was coming from, and all the people and all the bands, and Patti Smith was in the book.
Yeah.
And so I got to do this holistic approach. That's holistic, and Then I wrote a book about John Baldry, who was an English blues musician, white, 6'7" gay English bluesman, one of
Wow.
those.
Yeah.
And he was an influential kind of the Zelig character. So I got to talk to like uh, um, uh, Rod Stewart, Elton John, Paul McCartney,
Wow.
and Mick Fleetwood, and all these people are talking about the scene in London from that era when they were all discovering the American Black blues.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really, I think even Eric Clapton was, he sent me an email. That's right. He gave me a morning interview. He gave me a really early morning interview. Paul McCartney sent me an email with all my answers, and he was typing them out. But Elton John, Rod Stewart, and Eric Clapton phoned me, which is like, so this is where you get excited because you're not only telling the one story, but you get to talk about the whole scene.
Yes.
And that's what I did with Candy. And that's what I think I did with Candy.
And I think that paints a better picture of how this person came to be who they are. It's not just their background, but it's everything that was going around at that time. And also not only just who they were, but who they wound up staying, because there was a lot of, outside factors, which I always found kind of interesting. I mean, to me, whenever I've had guests on here who came up around it, especially comedians around the 80s who had stayed pretty much unaffected by the drug scene or the alcohol, or made it past it, or maybe dabbled and got out of it. That I find fascinating because it took over so many people's lives. But, to come out of that kind of relatively unscathed with a family, you know what I mean? And like, or to be able to do that, I feel like that's kind of a remarkable thing that people don't always touch on too much, because it's like, how the fuck did you do that?
No, and this scene, I think what was cool about the Second City world is they all started together in the stage, and they were all learning. They were the Second City Theater origins were in Chicago, but when they auditioned the Toronto cast, the very first Toronto cast, they used people from like Godspell the musical, the Canadian cast of Godspell. So that would be Marty Short, Andrea Martin. And then they had all these people, a few people from Chicago, like Joe Flaherty came up, and Brian Doyle Murray.
Yeah.
But they are auditioning people, and that's how Dan Aykroyd and Valerie Bromfield auditioned for Second City, and they brought John Candy to it, and he didn't even know what it was. He didn't even know if he was going to do comedy. He was a serious actor, and so he gets sent to the minors. Well, not sent to the minors, but he sent to Chicago actually, because Del Close, and you probably know that name.
Yep.
Del Close saw something in him, but he wasn't quite skilled in the ways of improv comedy. So he said, come down to Chicago with me. We're not going to put you in the Toronto cast right away. We want you to come down and learn from the head office. And then he gets a young Bill Murray, who's also just joining in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And so Murray and Candy are the new guys. And Candy's never been in a big American city. In fact, I think he'd never been out of Toronto.
Right.
And so suddenly he's learning the ways of America, but he's learning the ways of comedy at the same time that Murray is learning, and Murray's showing him Chicago. Wow. So to me, like, don't you get a chill just hearing that?
Yes,
like, because we know what happened to these guys,
Absolutely. And the other thing too is them kind of being and feeling the way we all, like, you don't imagine your heroes or people at that level, because that's how you know them, feeling insecure about their talent, or not even feeling like they were the best or as good as we all knew them to be. So that kind of, one, I think if you're a performer, it just makes you feel a little less crazy, a little less alone, because you're like, man, even these guys were kind of like put through the ringer, so to speak, in their own minds by themselves. You know what I mean? Like, because when you hear their peers kind of talk about them, you're like, I don't know if it's a retrospective thing, but they're like, oh, we always knew they had it, or they had something or whatever. And then to hear them kind of reference themselves at that period of time, they're like, oh man, I was gonna flunk out. I thought I sucked. I wasn't that good. I was insecure. I was feeling this. So it's just kind of reaffirming as a performer.
I don't know if you've ever had this thing where somebody tells you, like, if you have stage fright and you don't want to. I'm a musician, so mainly my work was in music, and but I did do Second City improv workshops, and I didn't think I was that great, obviously, or I would have been doing it. But one of the things I used to tell people was I wanted to learn how to be more confident on stage, because it was getting in the way of my selling the song, or selling in the sense small s, like, just projecting. And you've written this song, and in your case, maybe you've written some comedy material, and you really want to honor it. So you have to get the stage fright out of your head almost, because you're going to mess up either way. So if you're going to mess up because you're nervous, then you're screwed. So somebody told me that. I said, well, what about you as another performer who was very experienced? And they said, oh, I'm frightened every night.
Yeah.
And they said, but guess what? You just go on.
Yeah.
And because sometimes we think we can't do something because because we're scared, and that, although those people are fearless, they did it because they're fearless. No, they did it because they faced the fear and did it anyway. I
Yes.
mean, this is my TED talk, thank you, but
I'm
and that's
taking it
why,
all in. So
and that's why there's $1 under your seat, because you have to get up off your ass to make a buck in this town, and you see, Candy he was very insecure when he goes to Chicago. I have Andrew Alexander from the Second City organization said he really was. Candy hugged the wall when they were supposed to, do those improvs where you volunteer to join the scene. He hugged the wall, that basically like a kid who didn't want to get asked to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Like he was scared, and then they pushed him, and then once he's out front, he did that moment where he's like, "Do I become a dancing bear or not?" And he did it. And then everyone said, like, you could see him become someone else. Like,
right.
And then I guess he had to get confidence after a while, and that's what happened. So when he gets back to Toronto from Chicago, he's the new John Candy. And it's like the Beatles in Hamburg is the analogy I always use. Like, it's a famous analogy that the Beatles went and did their, 10,000 hours in Hamburg, or whatever the actual hour count was. And they came back, and everyone, boy, you guys are good. What happened? And that's what happened.
Absolutely. No, that's a really good point. There's a Robin Williams story about Rodney Dangerfield. It was like one of the Rodney documentaries, but I remember they were interviewing Robin when he was alive, and he said, obviously when he was alive, they don't dig people up for those things. But they,
good point.
right? Yeah, they don't. Why would they do that? But he was saying, Rodney was in his club about to go on stage, and he's standing next to Robin, and Robin said Rodney looked at him and went, "Look at me, I'm sweating. I own the club." And like, it's just that nervousness before you go on. It's kind of funny because it never leaves, but you just, like you said.
I mean, I heard someone say that if you're not a little bit nervous, then you need to get nervous, because that energy, it makes you do it. That's when you do your little line checks. You make sure you've got everything. In a musician's case, you make sure your guitar's in tune, because you're nervous that you're going to get it wrong. So you just focus on busy work that is important to the show, so that you don't have anything to worry about anymore.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because everyone says that too. There's a lot of cliches, like they pay you for the music or comedy you do for free, but they pay you for the travel and the worrying time, and the anxiety between gigs.
So fucking true. It's so there's weird moments too, where, like, I'm sure you've had this too, where like you feel like you're not. There's a difference between being confident in yourself and still having the butterflies, and also those moments where you're not feeling it at all. And then you're like, oh, this is going to suck because I don't care about this gig enough. Like, you know what I mean? Where you're like, oh, this is a different, like, if I feel nothing, I'm like, oh, fuck me, I got to get into the zone. I should be a little bit more excited or nervous or whatever it is. Yeah. And then it doesn't, God forbid you lose that, because when you lose it, I think it's time to pack it in.
What do you have tricks to get back in? Like, do you find like something in the room to focus on? Like,
yes, usually for me, when I'm like, if I feel like I've zoned out or whatever it is, I will literally go closer to where the audience is, like as if I'm and like just check I'll pay attention to what everybody's doing. So what each table is doing, if they're like, somebody's still eating, somebody's still not paying attention. And then it gets my brain into like, oh God, they're not listening. They're not, this fucking table is going to be weird. And then what am I going to do? And then it just gets me thinking and creatively going like, oh, there's real people here. You have a show to do. You have to fucking get in your, so that's kind of what I do to get into it. I know some people listen to music and stuff, but I can't listen to any other thing. It'll take me out of it.
Oh, that's a good point. Well, I can't listen to music with lyrics when I'm writing a book.
Yeah,
because it's like pointless. Like I'll just start analyzing the lyrics of the song.
Right.
Actually, I listen to the most what some would call boring music, but I love like Steve Reich and Philip Glass and all this German pulse music that's like just like long ambient chords and Cocteau Twins instrumentals and stuff like that.
Twins.
Yeah, no, but without the vocals, because Liz Fraser's too much of an event to like. But when you have just the guitars and just the keyboards, and it's like a wash, and then your brain, it's like an audio scented candle. It just changes the room.
Very, very. I'm quoting that. You have? That's good.
That's a trunk piece for sure.
Oh, that's great. Nobody mentions the Cocteau Twins enough, by the way. So thank you for that.
I love the Cocteau Twins. Yeah, no, they're one of those bands that if you didn't get them the first time, they're still out there somewhere on record, and you can totally catch up. It's like
Absolutely. So now, when you were doing this, I love kind of getting into the nitty gritty about the book necessarily. Like Was there anything that you found hard to write about as you were going through it? Because it's definitely like a thing where, you're writing about a hero, you're writing about somebody that these people care about. There's the weight of this is very important,
Yeah.
and it's important to a
Yeah.
lot of other people. But then there's also a personal level. So I just like to know, for you personally, was
Yeah.
there a point where you had to like pull back a bit and be like, how am I going to approach this
Yes,
chapter?
and I'll tell you, it's a very specific thing, or it's two prongs of the same thing, which is, so I really wanted to honor, the friends and family who were spending time talking to me,
Hmm.
and they were sharing. So when Steve Martin and Martin Short are telling me the story, and Dan Aykroyd, who did the foreword,
Yeah.
they're telling me their stories about the John they knew. I'm writing this book after the year or so or 2 years or so of interviews, and I have to make sure that when I tell this story, obviously the truth is a subjective thing. My version of what I feel is true, and I didn't have to, so two things I promised myself: no agenda. Like, I
Hmm.
wasn't saying this is going to be the book that does this. Like,
Sure.
it's more like, what is the research telling me? What are the conversations telling me? What's soaked into me by the time I'm ready to go here? And then secondly, when you're dealing with subjects that this is something very topical, actually, because people talk about the war on woke and stuff like that. But
Yeah. Yeah.
the way I understand a lot of what I think is a code for me is, if you're writing about a guy who had weight issues and was body shamed, and people are reading it, they've got to know that I'm not body shaming John.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
telling you that John saw a poster where they'd said something about him being a big blimp, and a poster designed for the studio for the film he's in, and his own team, or his own company's team, is putting this poster, and he's got to go, guys, that's a bit too on the nose. And also he goes
Yeah.
on diets, and he gains weight, and he loses weight, and he gains weight. That stuff, every time there's several mental health things in the book. One, starting at the age of 5, when his own father dies.
Hmm.
John Candy's father was 35 years old. John Candy was 5,
Yeah.
and he lost his father and was raised by his mom and his aunt.
Right.
And so he had to carry people for a lot of his life. And so that's why he became a mensch and a nice guy, because
Yeah.
he had modeled compassion from his parent, from his mother. But also he felt responsible, like that thing that happens. It happens a lot in divorces too. And that was going on. And then there's the fact that he's a big guy, so he's self-conscious. He literally did want to join the American military to become a lean meat fighting machine
Right.
years before he did Stripes, which
Right.
is, I mean, and it was written for him, but I don't know if they knew that actually happened to him.
Right.
But so that's why he brought that to his work. So there's all the body issues all the way through it. And then the second part is, because he was so wired all the time, his version of slowing down was that he'd get into like drinking like rum and coke and eating like food as what we now call medicating. He was self-medicating with like big steak dinners at 2 a.m. for a
Sure.
guy who's already big. And then he would have a trainer the next day, but like now he's hungover, and it's just and he could show up and work because that's the kind of guy he was. So
Yeah.
the kind of person he was, I didn't want to sort of make it be a mommy dearest about John Candy, because like his habits are, by my personal standards as a recovering person, I would like, wow, I would want him. I kept saying, don't have another drink, John, but and it's the 80s and people are doing far worse things. And he actually gets off some of those things because his buddy, John Belushi, passes away, and it scares the hell out of him.
Right.
He called John Belushi the bear, because
Yeah.
the bear was, indestructible. And he was
Right.
like such a role model. And when
Yeah.
he said, when the bear died, if the bear could die, any of us could die,
Yeah.
and that really affected him. So that's the stuff I talk about, and I try to not make it sensationalistic, is what I'm saying, why it was difficult. It was difficult because I wanted to walk through it with them,
Hmm.
them telling me the story without judging and without making it seem more sensational than it was. Because there's
Right.
definitely some things where you go, whoa, my God, don't do that.
Absolutely.
Like,
Well, you do a good job of taking the average
oh, thanks.
person through it, though, too, because I felt the same way. There were so many instances in the book where I had to be like, well, this has already happened, so I can't really like, I know
Yeah.
how this works out. But you are
Yeah.
reading it in a way that you're like literally going on this ride of his life with him. So you're like, oh my
Yeah.
God, if I could just fucking pull the brakes right now, that'd be amazing. But you just have to go
That
through
is,
it.
by the way, one of the it's hard, but one of the things that's rewarding when you finally finish a book like this is is that you when people say that they felt like they were there with the story, like, and so when he gets a bad break or a break
Yeah.
that's confusing to him, and you're reading along with it and you're going, oh my God, no, don't tell John that he's fat.
Right.
Like why did he tell him? Why did that interview say that? Because that's the last thing John wants to hear, because I know that from the 2 interviews before he did where he was really upset.
Yeah.
And so when you have the empathy and the context for for what he was going through, or why he chose certain films that you might have thought, why did he do that film? Why did he do the Dan Aykroyd film Nothing But Trouble, which is considered like a colossal, over the
Flop.
top, underperforming, but in other ways it was a
Yeah.
genius taking a big. So it's it's Dan Aykroyd's Megalopolis.
Oh my God. Yes.
It's him taking a big swing. And that's the other thing I learned, by the way. Talking to Dan Aykroyd is like, everyone should get to do it. He is a true genius. And this man created 2 franchises out of thin air. There was no Blues Brothers thing to base it on until
Right.
he made that up. There was no Ghostbusters thing before he made it up.
Yeah.
And so just the fact that he did that, and then he does Nothing But Trouble, and it doesn't work out, but he spends all the big studio money to do it, gets John Candy to play 2 different roles.
Yeah.
And John, why did John do it? Because Dan Aykroyd was there for him.
Yes.
And he wanted to help Dan Aykroyd. He'd do anything to help Dan Aykroyd. And,
yeah.
And so sometimes it worked out, like The Great Outdoors, and sometimes it didn't.
God, great. Yeah. And The Great Outdoors, by the way, one of my all-time, first of all, real quick, Nothing But Trouble. My friend and I, one of my best friends and I, and we're still close to this day, watched that movie like it was that, and Summer Rental used to be on TV when we would get home from school. For some reason, HBO used to run them back to back. And we would just call each other and be like, hey man, you watching Nothing But Trouble, that scene with it, and we'd just be like, it's on now, turn the TV on.
I love that.
Loved that shit. And Summer Rental too. As soon as it started getting closer to summer break, Summer Rental would play. And we'd be like,
Summer Rental was also a big deal for him, because like a lot of us comedy nerds, he grew up watching the Dick Van Dyke Show and idolizing Carl Reiner. Carl Reiner directed that film.
Yep.
And he wanted John to be his star. Name above the title for the first time, John Candy in Summer Rental.
Right.
And John Candy was so honored. Like when he got the call, of course he knew the call was coming. They said, Carl Reiner's going to call you. But when Carl Reiner calls him, Candy starts singing the Dick Van Dyke Show theme down the phone, da na 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 na, because he's trying to tell himself that this is actually happening. And Reiner just loved him. Reiner and Mel Brooks both loved John Candy, which was like, I mean, if they both love you, you're practically eating dinner with them.
Yeah, exactly. On those little Hollywood snack trays that they have.
Those little snack trays.
Which, by the way, I just did the National Comedy Center, the Lucille Ball Comedy Fest this past summer for the first time. Got to go there. The Carl Reiner's chair and tray table, snack tray, TV tray table is there.
They're doing stuff right over there, man. That I haven't been to that museum yet, but I know Kelly Carlin, and Kelly Carlin told me a lot of stuff about how they put together the Carlin stuff.
Yeah,
and
Kelly was there.
I love
Kelly.
Kelly's amazing. By the way.
She's one of the most amazingly, genuinely generous people. She one of the coolest things was, again, comedy nerd and whoever, she invited me to the Carlin documentary premiere, and then out afterward with everybody. So that was fucking monumental.
Oh yeah.
But then when I came to the festival, when I came to the festival, she texted me and was like, "I'm so glad you're here," like telling me places to go to eat. So she's like a warm hug.
Yeah, she showed up at she was at when I did a book launch for my Todd Rundgren book in Los Angeles at Largo. I had all these musicians playing, but then Kelly comes up to me in the line afterwards. She was just there, and she had bought a ticket and was sitting in the audience, and then came up to me when I was signing books, and it was the look on her face because she was so proud. She knew the book took a long time to put together, and she gave me that Earth Mother look that she has, and she's such a great champion of. Well, she's great with the legacy of her father. She's a steward. Like, she is the person to talk to about any of that stuff. And at the same time, I am glad that she gets to do other things, because it's such a burden for her, I think. Well, not a burden, but she has a lot of work to do maintaining the George Carlin legacy, which is huge to everybody. And you probably talked to a million people who found Carlin as their gateway to comedy.
Oh, yeah.
But I digress. But I just want to say shout out to Kelly and also the museum, because I really want to go. I really want to go there because I just like, I know it's like the Smithsonian for comedy nerds, right?
It really is. It's honestly like I before I got to go. So George Slaughter was the one. I became friends with him, and he recommended me to whomever was directing the thing this year. So to get in through George is just fucking awesome. But then he was like, bring the podcast there, and he's like, because I got to. Thank you. I got to do, the stand up there and whatever, but they were like, bring the podcast, and he was
Brilliant.
like, do your thing. They set me up in the Lucille Ball set in the museum. So I got to do interviews with people on the set of the Lucy show, which is fucking bizarre.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very cool. But you got to go because it's very interactive, by the way. You don't like, you see the pictures online, but like when you walk in, it takes your comedy profile. So when you go in, you enter your name and everything, and then you just kind of pick through all these comedy movies, comedians that you like, and then it combines them. So as you walk through the museum, you get that kind of experience. You get like it takes you and whoever you're with, and you get to see who the person sitting next to you likes, somebody that you might like doing stand-up, the TV shows, and it just gives you this entirely immersive experience, well-rounded comedy experience. It's amazing. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I look forward to that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe someday there'll be a candy, if not already, there'll be some candy stuff in there, SCTV stuff. But
That would be great. There's SCTV
and that's
stuff.
me bringing it back. See that?
Yes.
I'm really good at this.
You are really good at that. I was gonna, yeah. Well, the other thing I was gonna say too, you were talking about the Dan Aykroyd stuff and the great outdoors and their camaraderie. Was it? I think this is in your book too. But was it Dan and John? Was it Dan who brought John out to told him to try out for SNL, or am I wrong? Was that like who was the one?
No, he didn't tell him to SNL. But it was Second City Stage.
Second City Stage. Okay.
Yeah. So what happened was Dan Aykroyd and Valerie Bromfield were comedy partners from Ottawa, Canada, and they moved to Toronto to do stuff. They knew Lorne, by the way. They knew Lorne from years before at the CBC radio TV in Canada. And this was, so Lorne was already doing Laugh-In and stuff at this point.
Yeah.
Speaking of George Slaughter, we're bringing it all back.
Yeah, right.
And of course, you can't say Slaughter without laughter. It's just anyway. But but I know this is my brain. But so they're in the scene in Toronto. All these different actors, the Godspell people, and then Aykroyd hears that the Chicago Second City are sending up someone to audition for the first 1973 Toronto cast, and that is how he got tricked into auditioning. So,
got it.
But then they did try to get John Candy on SNL a few times.
Okay.
And he did actually host SNL. It was when Jim Belushi's first episode of when he was in the cast of SNL, John Candy was the host. So
that's phenomenal. That's another one of those things though too, where like the cascade of effect that Jim Belushi's death had on almost everybody who was around.
John Belushi. Yeah.
John Belushi. Yeah. John Belushi, like when you were talking about him earlier too, like there's so many people who I guess who were in his world, like who were friends with him, who he died, but they wound up stopping their destructive behavior because they didn't think he could die.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like if John Belushi could die, then anyone could die.
Yeah.
And a lot of people tried several times, and didn't Robin have a whole period where he got straight and then he started doing it again and drinking and
like 30 years later or something like that too. I think it was like a movie in Alaska where he was like felt too isolated and alone doing this shoot. Like it was an indie film in Alaska that he was like not thrilled about doing, but he just didn't realize that like how depressing Alaska is.
Well, it wasn't like Midnight Sun kind of situation.
Yes.
So he's losing. Yeah. Like that'll mess with your head for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And he was like,
and also being lonely. I think a lot of people suffer from that when they're on location for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Robin loved people. We're talking about Robin now, but that's fine.
I know that's funny. Well, I do have a question about that I don't think was in this book, but it's just one of those things that I know was kind of in the ether. Robin Williams did a movie called Club Paradise.
That's right.
It was with the entire cast of SCTV, except
most of the cast. Yeah.
Most of the okay, yeah. But John Candy wasn't in it, and I always kind of wondered like what the hell happened there. Do you know?
Yeah, to be honest, I can't remember what the official reason was, but I think he was committed to another project. It might have actually been one of the John Hughes films, maybe. I think he might have been around the time of Uncle Buck. I'm not
Oh,
like
okay.
someone else out there. And this is the thing is, I did all this writing a while ago, and that question hasn't come up lately, so I haven't really checked lately.
Right.
I wonder if it's in my index. I'm going to look it up myself. But then, of
Man,
course, if he didn't make the film, then why would it be? But
no, I hear you. But it is one of those weird things where I was like, wow, all his buddies are in this film, and then for some reason, I mean, I guess that makes sense if he had something else to do. But I also feel like he wouldn't pass up an opportunity to work with all those guys again.
yeah, I mean, it also it could have been down to who was directing or producing it. Like I
Right.
don't know who produced that. Was it Ivan Reitman?
Yeah,
Ivan's his friend, so he probably would have got a first call. But remember, he turned Ivan Reitman down for Ghostbusters.
that's right.
So I don't know. I talked to Ivan. Obviously, I'm going to say what you said before he died. But literally 2 weeks before Ivan Reitman died, I had a great call with him where we talked
Wow.
about everything. And he didn't know a lot of things that other people had told me about. For instance, when they made Stripes and they did the mud wrestling scene, uh, Candy had complained to his close friends who were in the movie, Joe Flaherty and Dave Thomas, that he found it degrading for himself to be, in his long johns in mud,
Yeah.
showing off how big he was.
Right.
And Ivan Reitman said, "Oh, well, I never really thought that. I never really like." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I hate to be the guy to tell you after all these years, but
Yeah.
apparently it was a big deal to him."
Yeah. And
And
that's what
but I
actually wound up killing him. You told him that, and he just
Oh,
his heart couldn't take it.
exactly. Oh, yeah, exactly. Oh, that'd be so cruel. But no, then he also put him in the movie Heavy Metal, which was the
Yeah.
animated, version of the magazine.
Yeah, I
And
love that.
Candy did amazing voice roles in that. And
Yeah.
so I don't think, in Stripes and everything. So, but that was before Ghostbusters. And the reason he didn't do Ghostbusters is Candy had this thing about him, he's agreeable and he's great with everybody and he's very cooperative, but he would get really set on something, and he wanted to do the Lewis Tully role that Rick Moranis. They offered him the role before Rick Moranis, and it would have been this the nerd next door guy, and he said, "I want to play him like a Tyrolean or Bavarian guy with lederhosen and two big Alsatian dogs." And Aykroyd, who wrote the story, was like, "I don't think that's gonna fly, buddy. We're not doing that." And then Reitman said, "Yeah, we can't sign off on that. So would you do it our way?" And he said, "No, I'm not that interested. Give it to Rick Moranis."
Wow.
And of course, what's great about that, I'm sure Rick Moranis was also in their sights, but
Yeah.
I'm not saying that Rick Moranis owes his entire career, but Rick made a meal of that role, and
Yeah.
that, I would argue Honey, I Shrunk the Kids is the direct recipient of it, and also Little Shop of Horrors, like,
Sure.
which Candy was in with him, right?
Yeah.
Candy played the DJ in that, so they love working with each other all the time. And Marty Short got the role in Three Amigos because Candy had turned it down, and it's just
Yeah.
like I love that, and I love that they all. I think of them like, those heroic stories of World War II flying aces, all the pilots
Yeah.
sitting around the bar going, "Oh, I was flying over France today." And I picture all these comedians, Andre Martin, Catherine O'Hara, like they're all kind of flying aces and they all knew each other. Even Chevy Chase says this in the book that,
Yes.
there was only a few of us. There was probably 27 if you count the Second City crew. And, and then of course there was this farm team growing up at the Groundlings, which would later emerge. But these guys were doing it right now, and they
Yeah.
were the guys. And so that's why, Candy would work with Chevy Chase, but then, years later, Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara are still working together, and
Yep.
all the people in the Christopher Guest movies. Candy probably would have been in those movies if he'd lived, that's what I
Absolutely.
think.
Yeah.
And so I love that there's a certain kind of, as Liam Neeson said, special skills required for this.
Yeah.
And they all knew how to cooperate with each other, because the
Right.
difference between improv and stand-up, I'm sure improv is cooperative and you're
Yep.
trying to do a scene together, whereas stand-up is every man for himself,
Yeah.
and a lot of
Absolutely.
times stand-ups can do both, but it's
Sure.
it's it's a different skill.
It totally is a different skill, because I can absolutely relate to that, and to the point where if I'm on stage, I'd love for myself, because I get bored. Everybody, I mean, I'm, there's stand-ups who are love to stick to their material and only their material, and everything else is one note kind of a thing, and then they get off stage or whatever. And I have
Dana
a
Carvey is a great example of a stand-up who came into sketch comedy and thrived.
yes,
You know,
absolutely. And then there's the other ones who like have, their material, of course, but then have this ability to play with the audience. Still very different from either doing sketch comedy or improv comedy. It's I used to do Improv Boston all the time, and I love those guys, but and they liked having stand-ups there, and they liked having me there. And every now and again, they'd be like, why don't you come on and do some improv with us? And I've never, like, you just get lost because these guys are so good. They know when to jump in, and you're used to being on stage by yourself. And there's no, I mean, I admire the hell out of people who can just work like that. It's crazy. Did you find any one particular interview that you had either hard to get because people didn't want to relive that? Because like I'd seen some interviews recently, I guess, about Candy where it just seems to be too much of an emotional thing. Their friend passed away, their friend died. Were people hesitant to do the interviews and talk about him, or were they?
Yeah, I don't like to generally talk about the ones I didn't get because it feels like I'm not sour grapesing this at all. But
no,
Andrea Martin wrote really tenderly about him in her book Lady Parts, which is I recommend that as a great memoir. And I knew that she had, but I got kind of greedy and I thought I could take the quote from the book, or I could get her to talk to me. And her publicist, I have no idea if she saw the request, but her publicist said, Miss Martin declines to talk about to do this interview. And I thought, oh, I wonder if it is too hard, because she speaks so movingly of him. Whereas Catherine O'Hara said, absolutely, it was just a matter of scheduling it, because I think they were just finishing Schitt's Creek up. And once they finished it, I went back and they said, how about now? And they said, yes. Nice. But the other one was like Bill Murray. When I finally saw him in the Colin Hanks film, the Ryan Reynolds film, I realized that Bill Murray has a hard time talking about how much he misses John. And so the reason I didn't get Bill Murray might have had to do with that. And it also might have been they didn't like the look of me. That Myers kid, like, I don't know. Maybe I didn't answer the magic question. Like I think there's a secret code to get in. Like it's like an entry code.
Yeah.
But I realized later that Bill Murray and also Macaulay Culkin is in that film, telling a really touching story that I kind of had a sense of in the book. In the book, I talk about how Macaulay felt that Candy was paternal towards him, even though he's playing his uncle, but that he was actually looking out for him as a young actor. And then in the movie, he really elaborates for Ryan Reynolds and Colin Hanks, just how much his father, again, I would have had a hard time writing about, Mr. Culkin being, shall we say, a monster. But Macaulay has no trouble saying it, and I didn't want to talk about that in the book without getting it from him. And so I kind of just played up more the fact that Candy was the hero rather than who the villain was.
But
but it's in there.
Yeah, and you get the impression of it.
So really, but most of the people, like, I was really touched that David Steinberg, who directed a film with him and was on.
He's great.
David Steinberg had a TV show in Canada, which was the first TV appearance of Candy and also Joe Flaherty and Marty Short. They were all on the David Steinberg show that was filmed in the suburbs of Toronto, at these CTV studios there. And so David Steinberg was, and anytime you get to talk to David Steinberg's great, but and so he was just so happy to talk about it. And people like that, like, that just, and I even talked to like people who worked on SCTV that were just names that I knew, like Jewel Hollmeyer. Do you know that name?
No.
Okay, if you ever watch SCTV and they have a dance number and they're trying to make fun of glitzy dance numbers, they would say, and featuring the Jewel Hollmeyer dancers.
Oh, yeah.
And Jewel Hollmeyer is actually a real person who's in that line of dancers. He's not a dancer, though. He's a costumer. And he made all the costumes for Johnny LaRue on SCTV. And when he played Divine as Tinkerbell.
Yeah.
In the Peter Pan story. And he would make all these big costumes for John Candy. And later, touchingly, he hired Hallmeyer to work on Cool Runnings, one of the later movies where Candy plays the coach of the Jamaican bobsled team, which is actually a great sports movie, by the way.
I love that movie.
But Hallmeyer is telling these detailed stories about. And sometimes it's like too much that you can't use it all, because he's like saying, and I remember there was an argument about whether the studio was going to give me a per diem, and it was supposed to be, and he starts naming the number, and I'm like, I don't think I'm going to quote the number of your per diem in the book,
Right.
but they loved recounting the story. And Jim Belushi was telling the stories about making Only the Lonely, and Chris Columbus, the director, was telling me the story about shooting Home Alone, and like to get the guy. And oh, by the way, Chris Columbus, he's
Wow.
such a mensch. Like I did it over Zoom, but he was like right in the camera, and like every question he was like, "Great, shoot. What do you want to know?" And he's, "Oh, I'd love to talk about that. That's great." I gotta, you just as a guy who does this, and when it's hard, it's really hard. But when it's easy like that, you come away feeling a little. After the Catherine O'Hara interview, which was also over Zoom, I had to call my family. I had to call both of my brothers. I think I texted them and I said, "Guys, I just talked to Catherine O'Hara, like our hero." It was like,
Yeah.
and you feel you're on a cloud, and it's that's a great job in those moments.
Absolutely. No, I know exactly what you mean, man. Was there anything in particular that you found out about, like, how much did you know about him beforehand? And how much more did you find out doing this book? And was there anything that you were not expecting about this man that you found out after having done the
Yeah.
deep dive into the interviews and stuff?
Two things that I think I keep coming up in my head is that I didn't know that he was such a great dramatic actor, and then now that I've noticed it, I can't unsee it.
Yeah.
He had an emotional intelligence, but they wouldn't have called it that in the '80s. But
Sure.
he had an emotional intelligence, which is something great actors have.
Yeah.
And he had started out, I didn't know this, that he had started out doing what they call legitimate theater before Dan Aykroyd corrupted him and sent him to sketch comedy. He could have been pop, maybe even play Shakespeare somewhere.
Right.
And when you realize this, you start to see it in things like Del Griffith, the big "I Like Me" scene.
Oh my
Only a
God.
good actor can do that. And when he's in not only the Lonely,
Only
sorry,
the Lonely.
but in JFK. I'm sorry, when he's in
JFK.
JFK.
Yeah.
And I have in the book Oliver Stone's talking about how when it's a small part, it's essentially a cameo. It was actually even longer when they shot it, but they made it into a cameo. And
Wow.
because
I didn't know
the
that.
film was famously 5 hours long in its first cut, so they had to cut everything. But
Right.
but he studied them. He was playing a real life character named Dean Andrews Jr.
Yep.
So Candy studied the New Orleans dialect, like down to the actual dialect.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked really hard on getting, I think he described it as the balance of fear but also the guy was afraid, but he was intimidating. He was trying to intimidate Kevin Costner, but he was also afraid for his own life. And that's a hard thing to pull off. God knows I couldn't do it.
No.
But he really studied it to the point where Oliver Stone couldn't stop talking about it. Like, this guy you're going to see. And this brings up Robin Williams, because I realized at that moment when I read that if he had been in a film similar to Good Will Hunting, if John Candy had been given a role like that, or if Tom Hanks's Philadelphia, I can't say Philadelphia today, blame Grady. And if he had that role, I think we would have seen him on the red carpet. I think he would have been at the Oscars. I don't know if he would have won, but because maybe the comedy bias would have been there. People would say, "Oh, he's not a real actor," but he's definitely. And Only the Lonely shows that too.
Oh,
and
yeah.
there's a scene in Cool Runnings too where he talks about winning.
Yep.
And I just think only a great actor. So I didn't know that about him. I knew that I liked him. I knew that I liked his work, but I didn't realize it's that thing that you don't know until you see it, know?
But even in Cool Runnings, when he says a gold medal is a wonderful thing, but if you're not good enough without it, you'll never be good enough with it. And it's a great scene. Powerful.
Put that on a t-shirt for sure.
Absolutely.
I mean,
he does have these great emotional moments in these movies where that's, I think, what makes everybody, like, even in the scene in Uncle Buck, a couple scenes in Uncle Buck, but that one scene when he's thinking about taking the kids to the track and you see him just take his hat off and you're like,
he hesitates.
oh my God, it's so good in that moment.
Because he doesn't want these angels to be corrupted by that moment. And even they play it for broad comedy, but even the way he's protecting the teenage daughter, I mean, they play up the whole, showing up with the hand drill and and just, but like, this is a very serious, dangerous sexual predator who's at this teenage party, and John Candy's character is super protective, but when he looks at her and she's mad at him, and then eventually he kind of looks at her and says, "I'm just trying to protect you and help you, and I know you don't see it, but I'm your uncle." And his whole character was that he didn't want to have kids because he wanted to be free, but suddenly he realized his brother's kids could actually be could be like fill that part of him that he could take care of somebody. And
Yeah.
like that's in a broad comedy. You know, that's what I mean. I love it when it's baked into the comedy. So you don't have to actually go, this is a serious film about a guy coming to terms with his emotional issues.
Right.
But only a great actor can do that and still be funny and make huge pancakes, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It makes me, I mean,
And punch out a clown. Sorry.
and
Sorry
punch.
to interrupt
Oh
you.
God, when he punches out the clown, that's a great dad moment. Just a great, like, you want that to be your dad. You know what I mean? Who's at the thing
Yeah.
like, are you drunk right now? Like, you
Yeah.
it's the greatest.
You were
And
gonna
then he
say
shuts
something
the
though, and I
door
cut you
behind
off.
him so the kids don't hear.
Yeah. I cut you off though, like you were about to say something, and I just want to make sure I didn't.
Oh,
I feel bad about that.
yeah. No, I was gonna say just the, you know, I always wanted to know, and this is, I don't do this with a lot of celebrities or anything like that, but I have this curiosity anytime I see a movie now that has those strokes of like a Judd Apatow film in general usually
Mhm.
has like, it could be the filthiest shit, you know, 1 minute, but it's got these soft undertones, these very human moments, and I'm always kind of like, where could Candy have been? What would John have been doing in
Yeah.
these moments, in these times? Like, how, like, that's for some reason, for somebody who never met him, but I wonder it all the time. I just want to know.
Yeah, you mentioned like Apatow and Paul Feig and Judd Apatow when they did Freaks and Geeks, they
Hmm.
allowed for that, and they're SCTV fans. They allowed for that kind of comedy that had all the ranges of emotion. So
Yeah.
absurd situations, and Joe Flaherty's character in that was like absurd, but also loving. And I really feel that that was made well after Candy passed away. So I feel like knowing that they know him, they knew his work. I mean, that they would have found a way to work with people like that in Freaks and Geeks, even
Yeah.
and the 40-year-old virgin or funny people or something like
Yeah.
and I that by the way, Judd and Paul Feig have been very supportive of the work I do with the Kids in the Hall book and the Candy
Oh,
book. And what I for that's for one thing, I can brag about that. That's a huge honor for me.
yeah.
But also I love that because it confirms something I feel about them, is that they're the people who have that heart,
Yes.
and they also have that skill. And it's there's a menschiness that comes with the story when you're talking about Candy. And all the people that I've talked to since the book came out, like Ryan Reynolds, who produced the film,
Hmm.
is such a mensch about Candy. Candy's kind of a role model for him, and he talks
Yeah.
about Candy in a way that you would be talking about a family member. And it's
Right.
and the book kind of attracted him. Like I just got a video text from him a couple of days ago that talking about the feeling he had reading the book, and I was like,
Oh,
I shouldn't name drop, but what I
no, no.
like about that is this is a guy who's you may have assumed he was sick of Candy because he spent a few years doing his own film, but he saw the same thing I saw, and
Yeah.
I guess at some point it's like we're like Buzz Aldrin and and Neil Armstrong, like we've both been on the moon doing this book and
Yes.
movie, and so we're the only two people who know what it looks like, like
Right.
and Colin Hanks, of course, who I
Right.
would
Of course.
still love to
Yeah.
talk to. If
But
you
the
can
cool.
set that up, I'd love to talk to Colin. But
Yeah. Well, you get Dan Aykroyd for me. I'll get Colin for you. We'll swap.
I'm on it already.
Oh,
Okay, for sure.
fantastic. The crazy thing is too is like I think they're good companions to each other because I
Oh,
think,
they
and
are.
yeah, and seen the documentary and then I'd read the book and I was just like, I think there's so many that, not that I very much like the documentary and it's good to watch that kind of thing, but a book does something in a way, it filled in a little bit more of the gaps. It's almost like when you have like if you're watching the Lord of the Rings, love Lord of the Rings, love the trilogy, could watch it nonstop. But if you want to know the fucking meat and potatoes of the thing, you read you get the nitty gritty from the book. You get the whole thing, gritty again, by the way.
Oh,
But
yeah.
you get you get the
I think we get a
you get
tasty
all,
cake for 3 references. We
yeah,
get a complimentary tasty cake.
exactly,
The
and you get more. Yeah, exactly. Well,
But you were saying, but I just want to say, I just want to jump on your compliment there and
yeah,
say,
yeah,
step on
yeah,
your compliment by saying one of the things that I was, I wouldn't say I was worried, but I thought, are they just going to like, there's a term, scoop or bump, like,
hmm,
are they just going to basically tell the same story and I'll feel like what a waste of time it was to do this, and you can get
mm,
it from a film. And what I do love is I didn't put a photo section in my book, and they don't go as deep on some of the, like the
yes,
whole history of how he got into Second City and how they made SCTV. And frankly, all of the years in SCTV, they're kind of not really part of the movie. But
right,
what the movie does is it shows you home movies, and it shows you photographs, stills, and scenes from movies, and has people talking about what the effect of John Candy was, and it's essential to see that stuff. But then if you were curious from seeing that and you wanted to know kind of like why, like we know he matters from the movie, now you can find out why. And inversely, if you read my book, it's such a treat to watch the movies now, because you know the context of what you're seeing. You know, when they show that, you know, like they made John Candy and Dan Aykroyd made a film for Steven Spielberg for his birthday called Citizen Steve, and it's an actual black and white noir film about Steve Spielberg, and it was, and there's scenes from it that go by really quickly in the Colin Hanks film, and I tell you kind of the story of it in here because it there's background there, and you know, and Spielberg also hiring John Candy for 1941, and they're at that party, and he doesn't. SCTV has a party in Beverly Hills because they're writing the series SCTV that season. They're writing it in Beverly Hills, so they have a big party, and you know, Lorraine Newman and Chevy Chase and all the SNL people come, but also people like Steven Spielberg who are like, I really love you guys, and he says to Candy, I want you to be in my next movie, and Candy can't believe it, thinks everyone's been drinking, and says, yeah, sure, buddy. And he says something like, I love that movie about the fish that you made, which was Jaws. And so then only 2 days later, he gets like an official letterhead, like a card and a letterhead from Steven Spielberg saying he would like to actually give you a phone call to tell you about this movie part. It was 1941.
Yeah.
So
that is incredible.
But that stuff's in the book. And Catherine talks about the details of the party, how they bought too much beer. They thought they bought too much beer, and of course they bought not enough beer, and like things that you would never think you want to know. Or Chevy Chase at that party walking around. John Candy put him in a headlock. John Candy put Chase in a headlock and introduced him to everyone. Have you met my friend Chevy? And he wouldn't let him up. And Chevy's laughing, and then he's not. And then a couple of years later, they're in National Lampoon's Vacation together. You know?
Yeah. Wild. Fucking wild, man. That was
as a nerd, I get nerded out just like thinking about the happen. Oh, also the fact. I'm sorry, I'm nerding out here, but
no, go keep going. That's great.
The fact that National Lampoon's Vacation had been shot and almost locked, as they say, you know, ready to go, but the ending was essentially the stand-in for Walt Disney. Was it Wally? Whatever. Wally World was Disney World.
Yeah.
And they. In the original story, they end up murdering Disney, the character that represented Disney, and that could never fly. And the studio said, it's too violent, and it's also kind of dangerous that you're showing the death of Walt Disney, and which never happened in this way, of course.
Sure.
But so then they had to write. So John Hughes, who wrote the story, had to write a whole new scene, and he writes the scene about him hijacking the security guard. And the security guard, they had to cast, and so they got John Candy.
Yeah.
And then that's when John Hughes, like, where have you been all my life? John Hughes sees his muse now. He goes, oh my God, I could write for John Candy. And now we have, like, you know, we have the polka scene in Home Alone.
Oh, Home Alone, yeah.
That character, because he wanted Candy in that, and then, you know, and then Uncle Buck and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And if Hughes hadn't seen that, like, you know, to me, it's like Hughes found his guy and Candy found his guy, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just and the two families became close, and it's just it was
kismet.
But it's Nerd City, man. It's like, if you love comedy and you love the history of comedy, like I owe my research to a lot of people that I read, like Sam Wasson. I don't know how to pronounce his name, Wasson. He writes about comedy, and you know, different people that wrote about comedy. Now I'm forgetting the guy's name. The guy, Wild and Crazy Guys, that book. It's great author, and I'm sorry, apologies that I just blanked on the name.
I'm blanking on it too. I have it. I know I have
but
it.
Wild and Crazy Guys is a great book, and it's about four specific sort of moments in over the top 80s comedy.
Yeah.
And so there was stuff in there that helped me. And so I'm nerding out, and I'm hoping that my book adds to that conversation and gives you the shade on John Candy. You know,
it absolutely does, and it makes me want you to go a little bit more in depth in that. There's a book called "Comedy at the Edge" by I'm doing it now too. I can't remember this guy's name, but he was a journalist through the 70s and 80s through the comedy boom. And then he wrote about that type of thing. And it is that whole thing of connecting all these dots and all these people together and where they were and how they met and everything like that. And I just like that your book kind of does that through Candy. You know what I mean? Like you get to see that stuff through John because
It's true.
he's the
Yeah.
focal point of the book, but also you're running through this timeline of SCTV people and everybody that's such. And it's just,
By the way, it's Nick Dissemblian wrote Wild and Crazy Guys.
thank you.
Nick
Richard
Dissemblian.
Zoglin wrote the Comedy at the Edge. I just remember that.
Yeah. Thank God for Google, eh?
Oh, right? Exactly. Yeah. And also, but same thing. Like I've got Comic Insights. I can't remember who wrote that, but that was followed Richard Lewis around. When I was a kid, I got that book. And
can I just say, Richard Lewis, I was so blessed that I got to speak to Richard also before he died, obviously.
Yeah.
And Richard was struggling with his health for the last few years of his life. But he told me the painful blow by blow. He also told me about making Once Upon a Crime, which is a film they made in Italy and Monaco.
Holy shit.
Which is a film I hadn't even remembered until
I don't.
And that's a whole story in the book. But then they did, Wagons East together. But the whole painful story of how much fun they were having making the film, but how it became clear that John wasn't having fun because he wasn't doing very well. And then he dies. And then the blow by blow, John C. McGinley,
John C. McGinley, yeah.
Yeah, I want to call him Ted McGinley for some, but John C. McGinley. And all these people are telling me their stories who are there in the movie.
Yeah.
And the day the set gets locked down because they found John dead. And so, like, it's after all the story I tell you about how he gets to this moment, suddenly there's this sort of ignoble end in the desert of Mexico.
Right.
And they have to tell the family before that gets to the media, and they put a news shutdown on it. And nobody's allowed to talk to the media until Robert Crane Jr., who is John Candy's personal assistant, is in Los Angeles, and he goes to the house to tell Rose Candy that her husband is dead, and then they have to go get the kids from school. All of this is Richard Lewis telling me from the point of when it happens to that if Richard hadn't talked to me, those stories from inside the set, and again, Richard was so kind, and he said he loved my Kids in the Hall book, and I was really it's bittersweet because, like, just to connect with Richard Lewis, who's one of those guys.
Yeah,
when
absolutely.
I was a kid, he kind of defined a certain kind of comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was the best, and he was another guy. You said it before about mensches. He was a mensch, and he for some reason a couple years before he died took a liking to me because I was do you know John Fugelsang?
Oh yeah, I was just talking to him recently. Yeah.
Oh great.
I love
Yeah,
John
John's a good
Fugelsang.
friend of mine, and I was
awesome,
and I'm always on his Sirius radio show. And I did his show, and one of the guests or fans had tweeted at me and said, "Your guest Poveromo looks like a cross between. It looks like if Richard Lewis and oh my God, from the Bee Gees had a baby." And
Barry Gibb. Barry Gibb, yeah.
Barry Gibb had a baby. And so I jokingly, retweeted it, and I wrote, "Papa, can you hear me?" and like with little song quotes. And Richard, like that, got back to me immediately and then started DMing me, and it was like, "Hey man, you got a great act, great hair too, by the way." And this is from and he goes, "And it's a good compliment when it's from me." And I was like, "Fucking A, man." I'm like, I don't even know what to say to that. You know what I mean? I was
That's
like,
awesome.
yeah. So I was just like, great hair, great act. Fuck yeah. And then we just kept this correspondence going for a while he was sick, and I would just kind of talk to him and see how he's doing. But no reason to talk to him. You know what I mean? Like just the nicest dude. So
yeah, he's nice. Yeah, no, he's a good guy. He's a good guy. Another weird moment, like a near thing, is so when I did the Kids in the Hall book, Scott Thompson from the Kids in the Hall was on Larry Sanders.
Oh yeah,
and so I reached out to, back when Shandling was on Twitter, back when Twitter was good. I reached out to Shandling, and he was like, "Yeah, I'll talk to you." And so we get to the point where we're emailing to set it up, and it was like 3 days before he passed away, and it was like, he said, "I'd love to talk to you. I have some great stories about," I'm doing it in his voice for some reason. "I have some great stories about Scott. He was really funny. He did some really neat things. I'll tell you about it on Tuesday."
Wow.
And that's it. So I actually sent, I think I took a screen cap of that email
God.
and sent it to Scott Thompson, because he never got to tell the rest of it. And but that's how it is, you know.
Yeah, I know it is crazy, man, because you just don't know, especially when you're in the kind of, the interview. You're more involved in it than I am. When you've been doing it way longer, but when you do these interviews, sometimes there's that weird thing when you're going to talk to somebody, and then like my producer will be like, "Oh yeah, we've been trying to get so and so," and I'm like, "Well, do you know if we can get them soon because they're 90?" And
Yeah.
I don't know how much, because you're like people. There's been years where people just kind of, like that, and I'm just like, oh God, I'd really love to talk to so and so before they go. You just
Well,
don't know.
I didn't get Carl Reiner for the book, but luckily a great fan writer named Tracy J. Morgan, not Tracy Morgan, but Tracy J.
Oh,
Morgan, a lovely lady from England. She had interviewed Carl Reiner about John Candy several years earlier, and
wow.
I was trying so hard to get Carl, and couldn't. I didn't have the right contact or something, and then he passed away. And
Oh,
so then I called up Tracy and I just said, "Do you think I could have your transcript? Like, I'll give you credit and everything, but like, and we didn't use it all, but
sure.
it's really
But I saw
important
that. Yeah,
it's important to have Carl's voice in the story, and it just and it
absolutely.
just but so a lot of my insights about what Carl saw in John Candy came from an interview with Tracy Morgan that was just in her self-published book, which is I highly recommend, called Searching for Candy.
Sweet. I have that
I'm
book. That's what I was just gonna
Yeah.
say. That's the only other book I've read about John Candy.
Yeah, I mean, when I told her that I was going to do a book published by other people, I said I don't want you to think I'm trying to make your book obsolete, but I'm going to do a whole different book than you would do. Like, my book's
Mhm.
going to have the way I do things,
Yeah,
and but I thanked her profusely because she I got to say, fan-led research sometimes is really great because people don't throw out things, so they're
mhm.
when you're like, I did a book about Todd Rundgren, and somebody had written a book called "The Dream Goes On Forever" that had almost every interview that Todd Rundgren had ever done, like, with everyone else. Like,
Yeah,
he
yeah.
didn't interview Todd himself. I don't think. I'm not even sure, but that book was so useful to me that I thanked the guy who put it out, because you basically handed me a dossier of research,
Sure.
and that's because the fans will do that. And in the case of Tracy, she's also a good storyteller, but she was really collecting and going out and talking to people. And so a lot of the people that I ended up getting my own interview for, I only knew about them because of Tracy. So I would thank Tracy again. So,
Nice.
and
Beautiful.
the fact that her name's Tracy Morgan is one of those great, I have to always say Tracy J. Morgan,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, because
When
it
I
would be
picked up
very weird if Tracy Morgan was the guy I was talking to.
when I first picked up the book, I was like, "Wait, what?" It's like, did he write a book about
Yeah.
John Candy? It's so random.
Yeah. It's
When
like,
you were
John Candy got me pregnant. That's my bad Tracy Morgan impression. Thank you
That
very
was
much.
solid though. That was great. Did you I think there's something different about Candy's comedic improvisational style than I think a lot of other people's, and I want to get your opinion on whether you think that's like inherently Canadian touch to it,
Oh,
or where you think it derived from in general, whether it was just he just came at everything from a sensitive perspective. But like most people, I think when they think of improv, they think of kind of, if you're improvising in a movie, it's like that kind of Jonah Hill style of like really quick, insulting kind of, quickly. There's like a negative connotation to it. He seemed to improvise in a way that seemed warm and positive, that would lead you in a direction, in a very comedic direction, almost take the other person with them. So it wasn't like he was selfishly doing it. It was
no.
just this creative, like, car ride he took you on with him while he was improvising. Where do you think in your research that came from, that derived from? Because it's not, I don't think it's
Definitely.
repeated.
No, I think it definitely comes from. So the Toronto Second City, and I have people saying this in the book, like I think Aykroyd says this, and Eugene Levy has said it too, which is the Toronto Second City was different than the Chicago Second City because, and I don't want to be self-congratulatory as a Canadian, but
Mhm.
there's a Canadian tendency to say, how is it for you, and make sure that you're okay.
Yeah.
And so, if the simplest tenet that everyone knows of improv is yes and, right, or also put as agree and then add.
Mhm.
And so it's a cooperative and community based comedy. And when you have Canadians practicing that practice, there's even more of someone like Catherine O'Hara, who's a very, very good Catholic girl from Toronto. And I say girl because when she was doing this, she was a girl, a
Yeah,
young girl. But she had a very strong sense of morality that she brought to her comedy, even when she's playing wacky characters, right? And so I think that Candy, that thing that he already had, the emotional intelligence that I spoke of, the empathy, the compassion, he didn't want to hurt anyone. He didn't ever. And so even when he was punching up, he could be pretty merciless, but he would never punch down knowingly,
right.
and generally found the dignity in people he was making fun of if he felt they were being punched down to. So I think there's evidence in the book where you see that sense of cooperative comedy that says we can get away with all the laughs and still be good people,
Yeah.
is, and maybe Candy was one of the ones who took it to wider shores through characters like Del Griffith and Uncle Buck in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Of course, I would call it Uncle Buck, which is the name of the character is Uncle Buck. Why would it be Del Griffith? But anyway, you know what I'm saying. And Uncle Buck,
Yeah,
and also the Irv, the coach in Cool Runnings. Like,
oh yeah,
but all that was less of an improv thing. But if you watch the work of SCTV, I'm glad that Conan O'Brien lately has been mentioning Yellow Belly, which was one of my favorite SCTV
so
sketches.
good.
Because this guy, how do you play a character? How do you describe a character like Yellow Belly, who is essentially a gunfighter who only kills because he panics because he's afraid?
Right.
Which that's a huge statement about gun culture, but they don't make it. They don't make a big fuss about it. They just let you see that people who carry guns all the time are quite often just scared.
Right.
And that's a whole gun control conversation that America still isn't ready to have.
No.
But you know what I'm saying? So there's a way to do in comedy that models something. I mean, now I'm lecturing. This is my
No,
TED
that's
Talk. I'm
great.
sorry. But I just, I'm excited about this because one of the things that, Viola Spolin, Paul Sills, and Nichols and May, they talked about this whole idea of you create these scenarios in the comedy and then you come away with understanding and you come away with an insight into the human condition, not just the situational. And you can get laughs all kinds of ways. And and Gallagher proves this, and Gallagher 2 proves this. But there are other ways to get a laugh, and also like in the storytelling stand-ups, like Mark Maron and people like that, who they found a way to almost go around jokes and just make it be that the very nature. And I think Richard Lewis did this too, which is the very nature of their confessional sort of angst confessions turns it into the same thing, which is the humor of the human condition.
Yeah.
And again, I can bring down a party really easily by talking about this stuff.
No,
I can make anything sound like not fun.
This is great for me. Do you think that would translate? Because we were just talking about him in movies today. Do you think that kind of thing would translate today? Do you think he'd find it harder?
It's hard. It's hard to know because there's two things that I've been thinking about lately. Is the age when comedy films had that broad reach. Because nowadays, he'd have to be a Marvel character to get the same audience.
Yeah.
And or something else. Unless there's
which he could probably do.
Are there A24 comedies? I mean, I don't
No,
like,
right?
You know what I mean? There should be.
The fact that they think The Bear's a fucking comedy drives me absolutely insane.
Although that might be the answer to the question: is there an A24 comedy? And you'd say, yeah, it's The Bear.
The Bear,
then,
yeah,
but then, I mean, I find Better Call Saul and the new show Pluribus. I find them hilarious at times, but I don't think they're comedies.
No. Well, it's like, exactly. I know exactly what you mean. But also, I feel like when I saw Ted Lasso and the stuff that Bill Lawrence is doing with Shrinking in Ted Lasso, I think those are almost, I don't want to say a return to that kind of, but it is. Have you seen either one of those shows?
Yeah. Lasso, I watched every episode of.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. And I think that's, I mean, I don't know. I felt like those were the kind of comedies I remember watching, like coming up with as a kid. It's nothing overtly mean-spirited. It's really fucking funny. It's all personality based and relationship based, and it's got an overarching story and characters develop over, you know what I mean? So like that felt comforting. I haven't found anything since, but that felt comforting. But Shrinking's the same way.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and there's probably something that I'm not thinking of or I don't know that does it, but I love those things in a comedy where you can actually, Keegan Michael Key and Jordan Peele, when they were doing that show, they would do the closest thing I've ever seen since The Kids in the Hall to getting across some kind of actorly scenes that are also you just can't believe that no one's made this joke before.
Yeah.
But then there's also a moment where you go, oh my God, that is so real,
Yeah.
and like actually, again, the name dropping, Keegan actually came to our book launch in New York City,
Nice.
and he, and of course I nerd out and immediately tell him, you guys are like, like so revolutionary. Key and Peele was like, it was, there hadn't been anything like that in a while, and
Hmm.
and he was like, huge, like everyone, he's a huge student of the things that came before and super humble about it all. But it was really nice that he came out for the Candy book, which I thought was really, touching,
Yeah.
because I'm very proud of the Canadian part of that. And
Hell
I
yeah.
think
Yeah.
Keegan's from like Detroit or something.
Right. Right.
And But anyway, so that's a name droppy thing. But
No.
it confirmed what I loved about Key and Peele in terms of this empathy thing.
Yeah.
I think they had a lot, and obviously Jordan Peele had so much more cinematic depth than anyone probably even knew, except maybe him.
Yeah, exactly. Those horror films are phenomenal. Like I love, like there's some of the ones he did, the two that he did, are like up there now with some of my favorite horror films of all time.
Yeah, and he managed to put Tim Heidecker in a film, uh, in a way that was so not the usual Tim Heidecker.
Right? Wasn't that weird?
Yeah,
That was cool to see, but also unexpected in so many ways.
yeah, but a perfect parody of a certain. I mean, I saw a lot of my own people in that character. But
Oh
anyway.
my God. No, that's great, dude. Is there people write paperbacks or whatever, and then they kind of fill in with something that they had wished they had put in the hardcover. Are you one of those people? Like, do you leave a project behind and go, I'm done with it here, and I don't have anything else to add, and yada yada yada? Or
We're talking a lot because this is still in hardback and it's actually, frankly, doing quite well.
it
And
is. It's doing really well.
but obviously the paperback will come, and I would like to have. There's a few things I would like to have in there, and we're also
Beautiful.
talking about adding. There's kind of a what I call the candy effect, like the conversation that has happened since my book and the movie. There's a lot of scholarship and people making commentary that I would like to sort of. My dream would be to somehow get an extra chapter that's sort of like what happened after this.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's the kind of
Anything
thing.
you
But
can
I
tell me?
can't promise it yet. No,
Okay.
I'm still out here talking about this one and
Yep.
trying to figure out. There's a couple of films I want to make, documentaries. I don't know if you know, I end up making the adaptation or executive producing the adaptation of My Kids in the Hall book,
Oh,
which
right.
was so the book was called One Dumb Guy, but then the movie comedy Punks was based on the book, but
Yeah.
also Reg Harkema directed it, and Nick McKinney, who's the brother of Mark McKinney from The Kids
Right.
in the
Right.
Hall. Nick McKinney and I executive produced it with a bunch of other people, but and that actually, again, with them bragging, I'm not used to bragging, by the way, just want to say, but we won a Canadian Screen Award, which is like a
Yeah.
Canadian Emmy, and maybe to you it sounds like Canadian Girlfriend, but the fact that I won any kind of recognition as an executive producer of a documentary has got me wanting to do more documentaries.
Hell yeah,
I
man.
just
Please.
approbation is so seldom in this business that when you get
Yeah.
it, you're like, I want to do another one of those things.
Absolutely. And I think, again, I just like the way you write these kind of books. I loved the Bare Naked Ladies one. I didn't get to read the Todd Rundgren one. I absolutely will read it and pick it up. But I love the John Candy book too. There's just a way that you do these types of things that makes you feel like you are almost like you're embodying that character, the person in the book, and you're going along with it with them. Because as soon as you start reading it, you're like, I'm experiencing everything he's experiencing. I feel the pain that they're feeling, and I feel like I get to meet, like, again, that party with Chevy Chase. You kind of feel like you were there, and it makes you laugh, and it makes you fucking be like, oh man, like I kind of missed that, and you're like, I wasn't there. What am I missing? I wasn't there. How could that be? How could that be a
John,
thing?
that makes me so happy to hear that you said that. Like,
Oh,
it's
I'm glad,
very
man.
nice what you just said about the book. I really do appreciate that. Like, because that's what, I write these books alone in the dark. Well, I mean, I put a light on, but I'm in the dark in terms of knowing how it's going. It's the opposite of doing stand up. You
Yeah.
don't know how it's going over until someone else reads it, and then they have to actually tell you if they liked it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell right away. Like I don't get feedback the minute you're reading it. It doesn't come
Sure.
telepathically.
Absolutely.
So one of the things I love about book events too is that when people do tell you, that they like something you wrote. So you have to kind of remember that when you're writing the next one, you know?
God. Right? The things we have to hang on to when we're doing the next creative endeavor are fucking wild.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
Like, yeah, I need to create an entire website of shit like that just so I can click on it and read it and be like, all right, we're good. I can keep going with what I'm
That's
doing.
a whole other book, by the way. That would be a whole book talking to people about the insecurity that they go through both before and after they do something. And then the second time blues. I always fascinated when people make that, Fleetwood Mac did Rumors and then Tusk. And
Yeah.
like what was going through their head when they made Tusk,
Oh my God.
because once the cat's out of the bag, you're great. Everyone loves you. You're great. Now what are you going to do? Now you can't do the shitty thing you were doing at the beginning of your career because now the odds are they want it to be another Rumors, you know.
Yep.
And the
Absolutely.
Beatles practically self-destructed based on that and other factors. You know, but miraculously managed to make Abbey Road before they left. But then if you look at what Paul and John did separately when they left, they both went really stripped down as if to say, back off. I want to make, so Paul makes McCartney and John makes Plastic Ono Band, and they're both handmade, homespun, lo-fi records because it's like, we're not going to make Abbey Road or Sgt. Pepper for you.
Right.
We have to start again.
Right.
You know, so, but
Yeah,
that's to me an exciting, maybe I will get into that area because I'm sort of fascinated with, like, I'm calling it second time blues, but there's other words for it. But
Second Time Blues is a great title though. Like I was like, should I title the podcast with him this episode? Second Time Blues, pretty great. Yeah, no, I mean, I've one question I want to ask, and then I'm going to wrap it up and give you the last three questions that I ask every guest. But this I'm genuinely curious about because you and I have a mutual friend in Dan Pasternak.
Oh, I love that guy.
Yeah, he's the best. And then Ryan, I was watching the documentary, and the thing that I was really looking forward to the most was I love Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. My friends and I watch it religiously every Thanksgiving. It's the only Thanksgiving, but I've been watching it since I was a kid. I can quote every fucking line. And then I saw the Steve Martin documentary where he reads some of the long, which I'd never heard before.
Yeah, he told me that too, by the way. He told me when I interviewed him, he was quoting lines from the movie that I'd never seen. Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. So that's what I want. One, I want to know because, so there's what they said there's like 4 hours or something cut from Planes, Trains. Who has it?
Yeah, it was a 4-hour cut, I think is what I don't
it was
I don't think there's 4 extra hours, but I think the original cut runs 4 hours and
4 hours.
It's apparently the length of film shot for the movie could take you across the United States twice or something.
Right. Yeah. So who has it? Do you know? Does anybody know?
I do know. I do know. I know that the Hughes family has it, and I know that I can't say, but I talked to someone who did have it, who had a copy of it, and it's well known to that person. It's well known to the Hughes family that this other person has it. But
okay, I think we both know who has it. One,
yeah.
But do you think do you think the Hughes family will ever release the extended cut of that, or no? Is it just gone?
I don't know. I don't know. I think there's enough curiosity there, but I will tell you this: I watched Coppola's Apocalypse Now Redux and prefer the original cut.
Wow.
So I don't know if that makes me controversial, but having said that, I'm glad I saw Redux. So I think there's maybe not a huge market for this longer version of Planes, Trains, but nerds like me will want to see it.
Absolutely.
So, but I also want to see The Day the Clown Cried. You know, that's just me.
Yeah. No, I hear you, man. I get it. Thank you for doing this, dude. I loved your book. I love talking to you about it.
Oh, I appreciate that, John, really much.
Yeah. And then
really
doing, what are the do you have any more upcoming book signings you want to plug?
Oh, I can't plug them right now. No, I don't remember them. But I'm doing a lot more sort of virtual library visits that I don't know if you're allowed. I don't even know how to give you the link for that.
Oh, okay. Well, we can figure it out.
But I'll have more coming up. We're hoping to do an LA. People in Vancouver, Canada are really mad at me because we haven't had a date there. And people in Los Angeles, where I have a lot of friends, keep saying, why aren't you doing a Los Angeles date? And it's just a matter of the timing.
Sure.
And also it costs money to send people. So
yeah, absolutely.
Find somebody with money.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So that's and I believe you have 3 questions you want to ask me.
Yes, 3 questions that I've asked every single guest that has been on the show. First question, bit of a softball question, but if you can go back in time and talk to your younger self, what piece of advice would you give yourself that would help you today?
You're good enough and don't worry about anyone else's opinion, because if you do something you love and work hard on being better at that, the thing itself is going to reward you so much more than any external validation.
Ooh, beautiful, dude. Thank you. Second question is, what had to end in your life, good or bad, that led you to where you are today?
I quit drinking in 1997, and I honestly think that it opened my brain, and it opened me to accepting all the mood swings that I had, the things that made me who I am. And somewhere in there, I also had therapy, and self-acceptance came in, and
Beautiful.
grateful as hell for that. So I would say the epoch turn was 97, when I cried and said, I don't think I should drink anymore. And then I thought, oh man, I'm crying as though I'm losing a family member. And then I started laughing. And I started,
Wow.
like, that's the comedy impulse, right? I started
Yeah.
laughing at myself. I thought, that is the funniest thing ever, dude.
Yeah.
So that's when I knew I was going to be okay.
Fucking awesome, dude. Third question ties into the show, the theme of the show. It's called Dystopia Tonight, obviously. If this is a genuine dystopia, more so than it is now, you woke up tomorrow and found out that you had 24 hours left, everybody, 24 hours left to live, what would you want, or what do you think would have caused it? So it could be anything from climate change, a comet heading toward Earth, or political collapse, to something absurd like zombies, aliens, or whatever. And what's going to be your epic death? How do you want to go out?
Oh, how I want to go out? I mean,
Yeah.
I want to sleep through it, frankly. But I guess I always think it's going to be civil unrest when people run out of food,
Yeah.
and people run out of social safety nets. And
Okay.
if you really want to know, that's what I fear the most, is that the people who think that they're backing, let's say, the current administration, the people who think that they're being protected by that government or corporations, will suddenly have a way too late recognition that they needed to take care of themselves and other people faster and sooner. And then they get mad and they turn on each other. So
Ooh.
that's, the expression, they make you hate, well, it's usually about immigrants. They make you hate immigrants so you won't hate corporations.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying all corporations are bad, but let's face it, it's so,
Absolutely.
I think the seeds of dystopia, they're already there, frankly. But I mean, when it's
Yeah.
really going down, it's going to look like, the OJ uprising times 100,000. And it's not just going to be black, white. It's going to be all levels of people just fending for themselves. It won't be nuclear war, I don't think. And maybe,
Right.
who knows though? Am I a prophet? I don't know. And again,
might
I would like to be asleep when it happens.
The imagery that you just painted of all that going on, and then you're just
Yeah. Take
like, where's
Sominex
Paul?
tonight and sleep. Yeah. No, absolutely. It'll probably be like Advil PM for me. But,
yeah, exactly. Fucking awesome, dude. Thank you again for doing this, man. I love talking to you, and I
Oh
really
no, it's great.
appreciate
It's
your
great.
time.
John, thank you always for inviting me. It's very cool.
Of course, man. Take care.
Dystopia Tonight.